past, which is something we're able to sort of remember forever and tell our children and grandchildren about. The crowds are immense today. There's a lot of people here, but they're all sort of here to pay their respects and doing really well, giving everybody space, letting us come through as well, which is really nice.
Okay. Hopefully you get a good view.
Hopefully we're trying our best to sort of squeeze in wherever we can.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Dermot, as I was saying, maybe 6, 7, 8 deep, and then there are other people that are mingling further back, a little bit further back from the long walk, sitting with their children, waiting for that announcement that the hearse has joined the long walk, and then I'm sure they will be moving further forward, children on their parents' shoulders, trying to get that moment that they'll remember forever, where they were when the Queen passed by for a final resting place. Dermot.
Kay, thank you so much, and you're right about the approach of the hearse towards Windsor Castle. We can tell here in the quadrangle itself because the Guard of Honour's lined up, their bodyguards lined up on the parade ground as well, and the timings, if they stick to them, which they have been, we are expecting the coffin to arrive on the long walk for that procession about 3:10. Then it will be met here in Windsor Castle at the gates of Windsor Castle and taken down then through the quadrangle, Engine Court, through the ancient Norman Arch, down Chapel Hill, past the parade ground, which we of course will be showing you right here on Sky News, into Horseshoe Cloister, and then borne in through the West Steps into St George's Chapel. The King and other members of the royal family, they've made their way here from Westminster Abbey. They will walk in procession and will join the coffin in the quadrangle of Windsor Castle. That will be led by a dismounted detachment of the Household Cavalry Regiment. Behind that will be a smaller procession, of course, than we saw from the Abbey, but nevertheless quite remarkable. Behind the Household Cavalry will be a mounted division of the Sovereign's Escort, then the massed pipes and drums of Scottish and Irish regiments, the bands of the Guards, the Coldstream Guards, the Household Cavalry, and then followed by kings, heralds and pursuivants of arms and members of the Queen's personal staff. Some sense there of the preparations for the reception of Her Majesty the Queen, and Kay made the point there in the castle that she called the office, and Sir Anthony Selden, the historian, as you know, is with me. The office, that is self-explanatory, Sir Anthony, where she rolled her sleeves up and got down to work, but also there's a kind of hierarchy, isn't there, in terms of the palaces which the Queen loved so much. Balmoral, her beloved Balmoral, of course, where she passed away. But did she prefer it? Seemed so, Windsor Castle to Buckingham Palace, both very accessible when it comes to her duties in the capital.
Well, she was a woman who loved animals, loved the open air, loved walking her dogs, loved being amongst horses, and it's difficult to do that in Buckingham Palace, although it does have the biggest private garden anywhere in London. But up in Balmoral in Scotland, she could really feel at ease and at peace away from the cares of office, although she always had her papers with her and was always working away. But she could relax, and she could relax more here, and such long memories going back to the very beginning of her life here. We were talking there about how she could watch and see the fires burning over London during the Second World War, memories of being with her beloved father, George VI, and mother Elizabeth and sister Margaret. Very special to her. So this is where she wanted to have as her place that she could be in the last years of her life from 2011 onwards.
Laura, give me your thoughts about what we saw in London, the pomp, the ceremony in the Abbey itself, that then procession up to Wellington Arch.
It was incredible, wasn't it? And I think
the kind of thing we will only see once, really, on such a huge scale. But the contrast, I think, is so striking. And what I think will stick in the memory is the beginning of the day, looking like that, the procession through central London. And it's almost like there is a sigh of relief to some extent as the Queen's coffin makes its way back here, home to Windsor Castle, the place where we know she could relax. She spent the last few years certainly living here permanently throughout the pandemic, the Windsor bubble, when she was here. And I think the very fact that at the end of the day there will be, with no cameras, no congregation, most of the crowds here I think will have gone to a private family burial inside that King George VI Memorial Chapel, inside this chapel here, just completes the symmetry of the day, really, from the high ceremony right back when behind the walls no one will see, just the family gathered, as we've seen the funeral of a monarch and then the burial of a much-loved family member.
And it's that tapering of the day's ceremonies, isn't it? From the might of a state funeral, it gets smaller all the time. We get this service, the committal service, and then quite rightly, the eyes of the world are shut out. This evening, it's a family event.
And I think that's how the Queen lived her life, this hugely public figure watched by the world wherever she went. And yet there were moments, perhaps many of them spent here at Windsor, that were private moments, moments with her family. We've heard, haven't we, from the Earl and Countess of Wessex speaking how much time she spent with their children and how special those moments were. And I think these private family moments are why the very final laying to rest of the Queen will be such a quiet, such a personal moment, so intimate for the family, given the huge amounts of international interest in everything here.
And on the family side of it, you mentioned that, the tributes by her three sons and her daughter, and they've come out during the course of the last 10 days, and each one giving us a slightly different perspective on a mother.
Yes, and it's interesting, staggered subtly throughout the last few days, but each one a nod to a mother, mama or mummy, and their own personal thoughts at this huge moment of grief, really, for each of them. Obviously, as King Charles now, head of the family, the monarch, and each of them saying and vowing they will carry on to support him. And I think that family support will be so important to him as he now is monarch. Royal standard flying here at Windsor for him for the first time. And the messages with personal thoughts, personal memories from each of the Queen's children, but very much ending all of them on that nod to the King and that nod to God save the King, as many of them said, and the continuity of it all.
And watching the procession, and we also had a split screen for you a moment or two ago showing you the scene on the Long Walk, which is self-explanatory. It leads its long way to the gates of Windsor Castle itself, the thousands of people there lining the route, and we understand that the hearse is not too very far away before we see then the coffin. It'll take a little while, but we will see it for one last time as members of the public before it's brought here to the St George's Chapel for this committal service. And Sir Anthony, on that issue of family, it's so strange for a royal family, and that attempt, was it successful to connect more with their public, to say, well, there are elements of us that are just like you. We're not as distant and remote as those of our predecessors and our ancestors, but nevertheless, there has to be some mystery as well.
So her early advisors, who had served her father George VI and indeed grandfather George V very much of the opinion that the monarchy and the family have to remain very private. But the influence of her husband, Duke of Edinburgh, and other forces, modernising forces, saying no, to survive, to continue to appeal, to capture the interest and the love of the nation, we have to be out there. We have to show ourselves. A very controversial BBC film in, was it 1969? And some people said, you know, that would be the death of the monarchy, because the mystique, the aura was gone if you saw the Queen with bangers at a barbecue, putting them on a plate. I mean, what left is there for the monarchy? What's the mystique and the aura? And yet it worked, and it did help us to get inside. The downside is that the tensions, the poor behaviour are magnified, and we all see it, not just in this country, but all around the world also. So it was a risk, not without some bad moments, but it was a necessary risk, and it's got us today to this week, to the fact that the attention of the whole world are watching this event like nothing else in the 21st century. Well, certainly not since 9/11.
All focus, of course, on Her Majesty the Queen, but just a thought on that. For the King, how does he maintain that level of affection?
By being himself, not by being her, and making his own connection, and seeing him walk around, seeing his delight and joy at the way that people have responded to him, having Camilla by his side, clearly the woman he's loved all his life, there watching every move, guiding and shaping him, is essential. He will find his own way. He is in tune with many of the spirit of this century, not least the whole green agenda, the whole mental health issue, the development of the whole child rather than just the concentration on exams. He's deeply emotionally intelligent, and he does care, as we were saying earlier. He cares for this nation and the fabric of this nation and the long-term survival of this nation in a way that a come-and-go Prime Minister can never do.
I want to talk now to our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, who has, of course, been taking us through the day's remarkable ceremonies, and as I say, more to come. And Alistair, at the moment we are seeing Her Majesty's coffin being borne in procession towards Windsor Castle, towards the chapel where she will ultimately rest alongside her husband and other members of her family. And at the moment then we are seeing that transition. This is still for the people of the United Kingdom, and indeed those who've travelled here from around the world, to still pay their personal respects to Her Majesty. But ultimately, by the end of the day, she'll be resting in the bosom of her family.
The Queen is approaching now through the Home Park in this great park of Windsor. And the great park, which has been really home to the Queen so much through her reign, and before it, during the war, when she came here with her sister, Princess Margaret. And it was to this place of safety that the King and Queen kept them during the difficult times of the Blitz. But she approaches now Shaw Farm Gate, and the police will release her to the ceremonial that awaits. And we saw from that aerial view how the castle sits cresting the hill at the top of this long, slow ascent that we will see the Queen ultimately go up into the George IV gates and into the castle itself. But before that, a chance for the State Hearse to pass by the household cavalry here waiting, the mass bands of the pipes and drums. And we have many musicians waiting. We have the band of the Grenadier Guards, band of the household cavalry, the mass pipes and drums, of the Scottish and Irish regiments, and also from the Army School of Bagpipe Music and Highland Drumming, waiting here on the road for the state hearse to join. And looking at the bonnet, we see the Queen's St George and the Dragon, which was always at the front of her Rolls-Royce as she went on engagements. It's caught many of the flowers that the public have wanted to throw. And some families there who live in the home park, which is the part that very often, when more able, the Queen would ride around and be very much a part of this community. This is, and always was, the Queen's home, as the standard of the Bluesen Royals is lowered in salute to their Colonel-in-Chief. At the service, we're going to witness in St George's Chapel the Queen's symbols of sovereignty will be removed, and she will be committed as an ordinary soul to the mercy of God, back to be surrounded by her Grenadier Guards and saluted by her pallbearers, the officers who were her equerry. Each of them did about 3 years, and so covering many years of the Queen's reign. And with the state colour of the Queen's Company Grenadier Guards, with her company keeping guard of Her Majesty, the parade is forming up with the escort behind of the Bluesen Royals to take Her Majesty to Windsor Castle. Just in front of her hearse, pages who looked after her over the years. And the procession formed up much as it was in London, with the court leading the Queen to her funeral.
Funeral procession by the centre. Slow march.
Led by the senior regiment of the British Army, the Life Guards. The band of the Household Cavalry is playing Mendelssohn's Funeral March. The state colour of the Queen's Company has a wreath around it to mark that this is the battle honour day of Nijmegen, and also the black ribbons in mourning to reflect the sadness of this regiment.
Abi, bunları yaratın. Nautan shi, salma da.
with the music of the bands leading this procession, it's quite possibly the music of the horses' hooves that would have given Elizabeth II the greatest pleasure.
ሁለት አስተማርኩ ነው የገባው።
The band of the Grenadier Guards playing Regrets Panning, which will give way when they enter the long walk. To the massed pipes and drums, it will play Loch Duich and Loch Etive side. Heralds of the United Kingdom from the College of Arms in London and the Court of Lord Lyon in Edinburgh, who always lead state processions in Parliament and up in the Scottish Parliament. The Master of the Horse in the centre of our picture.
ማ እነማ
Paul Wybrew, who was page to the Queen, and other members of the Queen's household as they prepare to turn on the long journey up the long walk. And also Barry Mitford, the second page to the Queen. The two pages always kept the doors to the Queen and attended on her personally, and anyone seeking access to spend time with her would go through the pages for permission. A very personal service and a much loved Queen.